every social media feed, and the modern expectation of wealth is impossible to ignore. It is hyper-visible. We see logos plastered across designer luggage, viral stunts, and brightly colored supercars deliberately disrupting city traffic. But if you look at the absolute pinnacle of the American upper class, all of that noise completely disappears. The loudest displays of wealth are replaced by an almost militant commitment to extreme privacy and unbranded aesthetics. We tend to confuse high-earning professionals with the actual 1%. A successful surgeon or a corporate lawyer might bring in $500,000 a year, allowing them to buy the luxury cars and the prominent real estate. They are the working rich. They still rely on a paycheck. This chart shows exactly where the dividing line is drawn. For the bottom 99% of the population, income is derived almost entirely from wages and salaries, a flat line tied to the hours they work. For the top 1%, that structure flips. Their primary income exponentially grows through capital gains, trusts, and self-reproducing assets. Transitioning from the working rich into the true American elite requires a structural shift in how you interact with the economy. You stop being a highly visible consumer of goods, and you become an invisible owner of systems. The American elite were not always trying to hide. During the Gilded Age, the men who monopolized steel, railroads, and oil possessed a new kind of capitalist power. To legitimize themselves on the world stage, they had to prove their financial dominance loudly and publicly. They imported European architects to build massive palatial estates directly in the center of cities like New York and Boston. These structures were designed specifically to dominate the streetscape and demand recognition from anyone walking past. Inside those mansions, gatekeeping was literal. Caroline Astor famously dictated New York high society through a very specific metric. Her ballroom could hold exactly 400 people. If you were not on that physical guest list, your money meant nothing. This network of 400 families eventually institutionalized their exclusivity. They published physical directories like the Social Register, creating a formal, printed tracking system that cross-referenced elite lineage, addresses, and club memberships. Over time, an aesthetic rebellion took place, often called the Great Male Renunciation. As newly wealthy industrialists began buying flashy clothing and gaudy jewelry to simulate status, the established old money families did the exact opposite. They adopted somber, muted clothing to clearly distance themselves from the new money they found so vulgar. Once these foundational families secured their assets, their trust funds, and their political connections, they no longer needed the public to know who they were. The loud public validation had served its purpose, allowing them to pull the ladders up and operate behind closed doors. If you actively strip away the visual markers of wealth, how do you actually identify your peers? You stop signaling with what you wear and start signaling with where you are allowed to go. Ivy League universities and elite boarding schools act as the new invisible brand logos. They are heavily guarded ecosystems where the offspring of the upper class and their formative years building networks with people exactly like them. In adulthood, this function is outsourced to private members clubs. These are physical sanctuaries hidden in plain sight, unmarked buildings where the elite can socialize, negotiate, and relax, completely insulated from the public. Inside these institutions, members absorb an insular culture. They learn a shared vocabulary, a specific cadence of speech, and an effortless etiquette. It is a highly calibrated behavioral code that is entirely impossible to buy your way into overnight. Modern exclusivity lives in this physical separation. While the working rich buy objects to signal their rank to the world, the upper class secures entry into spaces the general public doesn't even know exist. That same philosophy now dictates exactly how the upper class dresses. The media frequently calls it quiet luxury or stealth wealth. We have to distinguish this from the famous anti-fashion of Silicon Valley. When a tech billionaire wears a gray t-shirt and a hoodie, it is a deliberate rejection of formality, a flex proving they are so wealthy they no longer have to care about dress codes. Traditional stealth wealth is far more calculated. Quiet luxury relies on garments that are meticulously tailored and hyper-expensive, yet completely devoid of logos or branding. To the untrained eye, a $3,000 cashmere sweater looks exactly like something you could find at a standard department store. This visual code allows members to identify one another in a crowd without ever exchanging a word. It signals financial capacity to the small group educated enough to recognize the weight of the weave or the hand-stitched hem. Quiet luxury accomplishes two necessary tasks simultaneously. It perfectly maintains the strict hierarchy within the upper class, while effectively camouflaging them from the public scrutiny and resentment that flashy wealth always attracts. This preference for staying off the radar is more than a fashion choice. It is a blueprint for how this class operates in the halls of power. If the goal of the wardrobe is to avoid public resentment, the goal of their political strategy is to shape the country without the public ever seeing the hands on the wheel. Journalists and political scientists refer to this group as the donor class. They are the demographic that finances the American political apparatus, and they do it largely out of public view. This chart breaks down how that influence flows. Capital originates in a private trust or family office. From there, it splits into seemingly disconnected philanthropic foundations and policy think tanks. Those organizations then draft legislation, fund research, and heavily impact public policy without the original donor's name ever appearing on a ballot. Looking at the data, the scale of this leverage becomes highly disproportionate. A fraction of 1% of the population provides the vast majority of political campaign funding, effectively directing the legislative priorities of the entire country. These capital flows do not function as simple charity. By funding the research that writes the laws, the upper class uses philanthropy to build a quiet, untraceable bridge between personal wealth and national policy. This brings us back to the core paradox. If the primary advantage of having money is social status, why do the people with the most of it spend fortunes trying to remain unseen? For the middle class and the working rich, attention is a currency. They have to remain highly visible to attract promotions, clients, and new resources. The true upper class doesn't need to attract resources because they already own the self-generating asset machines. By embracing extreme privacy, the 1% are purchasing the highest tier luxury available on Earth: total, uninterrupted autonomy. Status, at its absolute peak, looks like a void. It is the ability to walk through the world completely unnoticed, while simultaneously holding the levers that determine how everyone else lives.